What's up, everybody? I'm comedian Michael Halcomb, and on this episode of the Messed Up the Setups podcast, I've got comedian Todd Probus with me. We're going to talk about how he got into comedy, how he got into ministry, and clean comedy, all these sorts of things. You're not going to want to miss this, so stick around. Hey, everybody, comedian Michael Halcomb here, and today I've got comedian Todd Probus with me. Todd, we're just meeting for the first time. It's great to meet you, man.
Yeah, great to meet you also. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And let's just start with some of the basics. You're in Kentucky. Whereabouts in Kentucky?
So we're in Versailles, Kentucky. It's spelled Versailles, like the city in France. We're very phonetically, I don't know what you'd call that, but we pronounce we have some hard L's in ours, so we are Versailles.
Phonetically challenged. There we go.
Yeah.
I remember I used to live out near Versailles, man. Good old Woodford County there.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I remember going when I was in high school. I was in Grant County, so we used to play Woodford, and I remember going to the football field there at Woodford, and then I lived in Nicholasville for a really long time. Did my work, my education stuff at Asbury Seminary, and so very familiar with Versailles. And well, how long you been in that area, man?
Gosh, we moved here in 2003. So we've been here almost 23 years.
Wow. And we never crossed paths. That's amazing. So you're a comedian, but you're also a pastor. Let's talk about a little bit about the latter first.
Sure.
So how did you get into pastoring? What was the impetus for that?
Yeah, so I became a Christian at the age of 9. I grew up in church. My dad was on staff at a church and gave my life to Christ at 9. And honestly, ministry was not on my radar really at all until I went to, you're probably familiar with Georgetown College, which is just north of Lexington, up towards Grant County, actually. Yep. And it was sophomore or junior year there. And again, I wasn't planning on going into ministry, but just felt called to be in ministry of some sort. And so that I was a youth pastor for almost the rest of my time in college. And then this is where the kind of the comedy thing intersects, kind of put ministry on the back burner for a while, and then got back into youth ministry around 97, 98, and have been in ministry pretty much ever since. But that's where it started. It started growing up in church, becoming a Christian, and then kind of just sensing that call to it in college.
Amazing. Yeah, I used to pastor for quite a few years, like 7 years or something, in a little town called Sadieville, right there on the outskirts. Yeah. And I always laugh because like it sounds like a sweet name, Sadieville, right? But if you break it down, it has like all the worst words in it. Sigh, evil,
right,
ill.
Yeah. And then I'm reminded of Sadie Hawkins' dances where I was never invited. Because you have to wait for a girl to invite you, and I'm still waiting, actually.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So you're still pastoring, and I gotta ask, dude, because I still preach as well, and like I'm not like a funny preacher. Like I'm a pretty kind of like serious. I take it very serious when I preach. Are you a funny preacher? Do you work a lot of humor in, or what's that look like?
I don't, and the folks who go to my church would tell you I'm definitely not. They would say he's not funny at all. No, I heard your podcast with Jake Hovis. Jake's a friend, and for those of you watching, you need to go back and watch that conversation. And I'm a lot like Jake in this regard. I don't set out to be funny because I feel like that's not my role. My role is to be engaging, to get people interacting, with the text and so forth, and just engaged. Yeah. And so if that's humor, that's humor. If that's a story, it's a story. If it's a video clip, it's a video clip. If I find a natural way to insert humor, and sometimes it's just a riff, I'll do it, but I never want it to feel forced. That's just not my role.
Right.
And so, my folks would tell you, he's not funny. Not on Sundays anyway.
Well, how long have you been at the comedy thing?
So that's a really I have a layered answer to that question. So I was at Georgetown College, and it was fall of 94. I'm an old head. I go back a ways. And I was a communications major, and I was sitting in a communications class, and the professor was the head of the department. And he came in and said, "Hey, I'm going to take a sabbatical next semester. But the guy who's coming in to be a guest professor, his name is Jim Burge. He's got family in the area, and he's coming to spend a semester. He's going to teach a few classes, and he's from UCLA. And he taught, I think, film appreciation and acting class. And then he taught a class in stand-up comedy, like a college class in stand-up comedy. Jim had been like a resident advisor or on staff at UCLA, and he had helped found the UCLA Comedy Club, like an on-campus comedy club
That's great.
for UCLA students who wanted to do stand up, but also for UCLA students who couldn't afford to go to the comedy store, because
Right.
you're a broke college student. So, it gave students at UCLA an outlet to perform on campus. And it also gave students a chance to go see live comedy when they couldn't afford to go to the Ice House or the Improv
Right.
or the Laugh Factory. And so Jim got that off the ground in the late 80s, I think. And then he was a guest professor. So, spring of my junior year of college at Georgetown College, that's been 30 years ago this year, I took a class in stand up comedy. It was a 3-hour class.
Wow.
And it was every Thursday night. And I remember that because we would learn about comedy and work on our sets. And then I would get back to my dorm, and everybody would be in the lobby of my fraternity house watching Seinfeld and Friends. It was that
Yeah.
Thursday night lineup. And so the final was a show that we put on, and we each did a set, I want to say maybe 8 minutes or something like that. It felt like 30, but I think it was probably 7 or 8 minutes. And that was how I got into it. That was 30 years ago. I did it a little bit my senior year also. Couldn't take the class again, obviously, but I kept doing it. And then I moved to LA after I graduated college.
Wow.
Jim pulled me aside and said, "Hey, listen, you can do with this what you want." And at the time, I had a job lined up in the Boston area, a ministry job actually. And Jim said, "I think you should go give it a shot." I went to LA. This would be spring of '96, and it went so well that now I'm in Versailles, Kentucky.
I was gonna ask, what did your parents think of that?
I remember it vividly. Like I said, I had a job lined up in the Boston area, and my parents were very. First of all, they loved the comedy stuff. They did. They were very supportive. They thought it was a blast. But it's one thing to take a class in it, and
Yeah.
my parents come to a show for fun. It's another thing for me to say, "Hey, I'm going to move across the country and do this in a city of 14.5 million people at the time."
Right.
And I remember I was at, and you know how big a deal this is. I was at a UK basketball game, a University of Kentucky basketball game with my
Yeah.
dad, and we were going out to dinner, and then we were driving to the game. I remember where I was. I was driving, and he said, "Your mom and I have been thinking about what Jim told you, and we know you have that job lined up. Your mom and I think you should go to LA." You know,
Wow.
I almost swerved off the road. So, they were your typical parents. They just wanted to make sure I was going to have a place to live,
Right.
food on the table, clothes on my back, but they were very supportive. And, they said, I woke up my first morning in LA and I was like, what have I done? I don't really know anybody out here except my roommate. The city's huge. I don't know where I'm going to work. I just, I had nothing set up, least of which was comedy. And I called my dad. I'm like, I think I need to come home. He's like, no, you need to stay out there. Just give it a month. He said, but listen, if you do come home, we will not think less of you, but you will
Wow.
always wonder kind of a what if. And so yeah, they've always been very supportive. My mom passed away 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. And so she got to see me do it a few times back in the 90s. She didn't get to see me in this go around.
Right.
But I took a long time off. I did it out there for a little while, and then I thought, well, that was that. I moved, got back into full-time youth ministry, and I did not get back on stage for a long, long time. Not again until really 2021 or so. So there
Did
was a
the
couple of decades break there.
fire for stand up just fizzle? Was there just not a place for it? Did you fall out of love with it? What was it? What kept you out so long?
I think it was a few things. One is in the 90s, if you were going to really make a career of it, the assumption was you had to be in New York, LA, Chicago, or you had to be a full-time traveling pro, like just a road dog
Right.
comic. And I got out there and I met, others who were trying to do it. I met others who were doing it, and it just kind of lost its appeal to me out there.
Hmm.
And so I was under the assumption that if I'm not going to do it out here, I just can't do it. It wasn't like it is now where you can be a full-time comic and be based in Cincinnati or
Right.
Louisville or Nashville. You had to be in one of those major markets. And so it was a combination of things. I think there was part of it that I just was not at the maturity level to really do it at the time. I mean, I was fresh out of college. I think another part of it was that I was a little homesick. I just wanted to be a little closer to home. Ended up moving up to Northeast Ohio. And then part of it was it was a different scene back then. And
Yeah.
I just wasn't prepared like I should have been. And then to be honest with you, like after that point, I got married, had a couple of kids, and I know this is going to sound kind of ridiculous, but when social media came along, especially Facebook, it kind of became a canvas, if you will. You know, I was putting jokes on Facebook. I'm like, well, this is like doing stand up, but I can do it in my pajamas. You know, I can do it
Huh.
one thing at a time. I was just thinking of stuff and putting it online. And I'm like, this is like stand up. And so for a long time, I was content to just put stuff, for friends
Yeah.
online. It wasn't until right before the pandemic that I started thinking, you know what, it'd be fun to get back up on stage and see if I could still do it.
What does your wife think about it?
She's very supportive. She's never not been supportive. However, I will say that when I got back into it and started doing mics, at the time, both of my daughters were at home. One has since graduated and moved off to college. And so my wife was going with me to all these mics. And it was a lot of, I know. It was a lot of fun. We're just road tripping. We'd go to, Comedy Off Broadway is about 10 minutes from our house, 15 minutes from our house. But
Okay. Yeah.
we would road trip to Louisville, road trip to Cincinnati, and it was a lot of fun, and she would help me. She would help calm my nerves on the way there, and then
Wow.
we would help debrief like after, like, hey, I don't know, if you realized it, but that joke really hit tonight, or that joke, that's the second mic in a row that joke didn't quite hit. I would move this around. And because when I'm up there, I'm just kind of flowing and
Yeah.
I can tell what hits and what doesn't, but I can't remember all that in real time. And so
Yeah.
it's good to
Right.
have that set of eyes and ears. And that's what she was doing. But on the flip side, that meant that she was sitting through a lot of terrible comedy.
Yes.
I mean,
Right.
just a ton of
Yep.
terrible comedy. And
That's why my wife does not go with me mainly.
it
Yeah.
started to kind of wear on her, I think, bless her heart. She said, and I think she was half joking, she wanted to be a life coach. She's not a life coach, but she said, I want to be a life coach for aspiring comics and just stay right off
Yeah.
stage so
Yeah.
that as they come off, I can say, you might want to try photography. You might want to try calligraphy, something else, or you've
Uh,
got something there. But bless her heart, she's been great. Now that my oldest daughter is no longer here, we've tried to be sensitive to like not having my younger daughter be here by herself,
yeah.
off in Louisville or Cincinnati. So she doesn't go as often. When she can, she does, and especially when I do something in Louisville or here in Versailles, she's really supportive. But she's great, and she loves comedy, and she helps me just kind of evaluate things,
Yeah.
process things.
So you perform, you also produce, so you run shows. I'm curious for those out there who might be watching or listening. Maybe they're thinking about getting into stand-up comedy. I'm curious, like, what's like one or two top things that you might say to somebody who comes to you and is like, Todd, I think I might want to try this. What would you say to him?
Try performing or
Yeah,
try
try just
producing.
maybe I want to try go to an open mic.
Yeah.
What should I do? Like, what advice do you have?
So I had this conversation with somebody a month or two ago. I've had it with others too. And what I've told them is you need to write down what you think is funny. And then you need to ask yourself, is this still funny to me? Revisit it. Because I have all kinds of notes on my phone where in that moment I jotted something down that in that moment to me was funny. And then I usually don't look at it again for a week. And I say, okay,
Mm,
is this still funny to me? And if it's still funny to me, I think, okay, would this be funny to other people, like friends and family? Could I make this funny to somebody who I know? And
right.
then once I clear that hurdle, then the hurdle that so many young, or not young, but new comics don't really think about is, can I make this funny to strangers? Because
Right.
that's really
Right.
the trick. People get on stage and you can tell they, in their friend circle or with their
Yeah.
family, their cousins, they are the fun one. They're the jokester. They can make them laugh, but they've never thought about the fact that you're the crowd at Comedy Off Broadway or the Caravan or Commonwealth Comedy Club up in Cincinnati. You have to make it funny to people who don't know you.
Right.
And if you can make it, if you feel like you've got something that you can make funny to people who don't know you, and you've written it out, you've got a punch there, you've got something there, then write it out, flesh it out, practice it, make it tighter, and then get up on stage and do it. That's the only
Right.
way you know whether or not it's going to work is by doing it. And
Right.
but you have to clear those hurdles first. And I feel like a lot of new comics would have a better introductory experience if they knew that those are the hurdles you have to jump. Not just this is funny to me, not just this is funny to my friends, but I can make this funny to that random guy or girl in the crowd.
Yeah, I'm curious too. I mean, that's great advice. Totally agree with that. Affirm that. I'm curious when you were taking that class back in with the 90s or whatever with Jim at Georgetown College. What was sort of the structure? Like
Mhm,
how did he teach the class to write a joke? And I'm asking because I'm a college professor
mhm.
and I teach Comp 1 and Comp 2. And in my classes, I teach joke writing. I
Oh, wow.
teach writing via joke writing. So like I have a way that I do it. So I'm like super intrigued at how did this guy do it? Now he had a stand-up comedy class. Mine's a comp class, but I do stand-up teach
Mhm.
joke writing in there. So I'm very curious. What were some of the things that he taught you?
It's been 30 years, so my memory is a little fuzzy. It was a 3-hour class. I remember we met from 6 to 9, and it feels like the class was kinda divided up into thirds in terms of structure. One third is I remember that each week, we each had to bring in something that we thought was funny,
Great.
and we had to present it and then share what we thought made it funny. Why was it funny? It could be a Dave Barry article. It could be an SNL sketch on VHS back at the time. It could be whatever. And so it made us think about, let's say Tommy Boy, the Chris Farley
Yeah.
movie was out at the time. Okay, I laugh at Tommy Boy, but why am I laughing? Maybe it's because it's so physical. Maybe it's because of this word play. I remember one of the things I took in was a VHS clip of Jim Belushi doing an SNL weekend update about the phrase "the luck of the Irish," and I remember just laughing so hard at that. But there's a difference between laughing at something and then being able to explain to people
Right.
why it's funny. So the first part of the class was that, and then best as can recall, he then took kind of the middle of the class and talked about joke writing and the different types of stand up. So he would talk about observational humor. Seinfeld, obviously huge at the
Yeah.
time. He would talk about political humor. He would talk about absurdist humor, like Stephen Wright.
Yeah.
He would talk about different kinds of stand up, why it worked, and how to write in that way. And then the last third of the class was a writing workshop. We would get in pairs or groups of three, talk about, and we would work on our sets. And we would kind of
Huh.
iron sharpens iron, work with each other, and then he would visit around. So that's how he structured the class. I don't remember how much talk there was about literal. I mean, I'm sure he did like, what is it called? The rule of three or something like
Yeah.
that,
Right.
that type of thing. But that's how I remember the weeks were structured. So we had to learn the philosophy behind the laughs. And then we learned about different types of comedy. And then it was just a writing workshop. So that's best as I can remember how he structured it.
That's great. That sounds like it would have been a
Oh, it
really
was
fun
great.
class. Other than you, did anyone come out of that class and do stand up or stick with it?
No, um, I don't believe so. I can't think of anybody else that did it from that group. He did it again. He actually ended up staying another year or so. He was only going to be there for a semester, but he fell in love and stayed in the area. And so he taught it again the next semester or the following year. And I don't know that anybody from that class kept doing it either, but he actually did some shows. He opened for Stephen Wright in Lexington,
Wow.
and we all got to meet Stephen Wright, which was just so cool. Stephen Wright's "I Have a Pony" album is one of my 4 or 5 favorite comedy albums,
Yeah.
and so we met Stephen Wright. But I think I'm the only one who continued to do it. I know I'm the only one still doing it.
Wow, amazing. And so you've sort of had a resurgence of interest in stand up and like I said you're producing and performing and yeah, I mean what's that been like in the last few years to get back at it?
It's been a lot of fun. It's been more fun than I expected. If that I know that sounds really weird, but when I started, I found myself when I would be mowing the grass thinking of jokes, thinking of bits. And I would come in and I might even have it. I won't look for it now. No, I've got it right here. I found like one of these little notebooks. I bought
Yep.
one. List literally says material on it. And I would just write ideas down and I remember telling my wife, if I could get 5 minutes that I feel comfortable with, I'm going to try it again. And so it was November of 21. the pandemic hit, so everything shut down. But November of 21, I went to a show up and go up mic. I didn't tell anybody but my wife. She and I went. The intro was this local comic, and this is how she literally introduced me. She goes, "I've never heard of this next guy. Give it up for Tom Probus." And I'm
Way
like,
to
wow,
prime the crowd.
with that kind of rousing intro, how could I fail? And I had a fun set. It was fun. It brought back kind of those dopamine hits from when a joke
Yeah,
lands.
yeah,
And so I took some time off. Like I thought, oh, that was fun. I won't do that again. And then the next like September, I just started doing mics, Louisville, Cincinnati, Lexington. I was doing a mic or two a month. Again, my wife was going with me. We were having a blast. And then I got asked to headline a show, and I was not ready to headline a show. I had maybe 12 or 15 good minutes. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. And then it was like cramming for a test. I was going to a
right.
mic a week. And I mean, I was just trying bits once. If they worked, I kept it. I was just scrambling. And so that was exhilarating and nerve wracking. And now I've
Yeah,
settled into more of a groove where I don't do mics all the time. We've started a new clean comedy mic here in Woodford County. So that's kind of become, my comedy baby here. It's local, it's fun. I still try to hit up mics every once in a while in Louisville and Cincinnati just because I love those scenes. But I'm able to be a little more choosy and, find opportunities that really fit me better instead of just trying to do everything. So
right
I
on.
think
What
I've settled into a nice groove.
do you have a writing routine, or do you just write when inspiration strikes?
So, no, I need a writing routine, but generally, and I was telling you this before we started, I have the notes app on my phone
Yeah.
probably has 75 or 80, and I've gotten better at that. When I first started, I would just put Doritos,
Did you?
and then I would come back like a week later and be like, what
Yeah.
in the world was this about? They're delicious. The Cool Ranch don't have as much seasoning as they used to. I don't
Yeah.
know. I just, in that moment, so I've gotten better at putting like 6 or 8 words. And then if I'm feel like I'm just kind of on a heater, I just I have a little notepad and I start actually fleshing it out. I don't have a set time or place or day that I really sit down and flesh it out. I need to. Some of it's on an as needed basis. So for example, I'm going to be trying out a new set of at this mic in November. And so probably next week I'll be like, okay, what bits do I want to try? I'll flesh those out and put together a set for that. So
Yeah,
it's more of I've got this coming up. I'm going to write a new set for that and
yeah.
make it specific to that and then evaluate it and see how it went.
Do you ever experience this thing when you come up with a joke that you just know this is gonna hit? Like, even if you never tried it at a mic, you just know. Like, I've talked about it on the podcast with other comedians. It's like when you shoot that free throw or 3-pointer and you know what's going in. Like, you could do the Steph Curry and turn around and start walking the other direction, right? You ever write a joke and you just know this one's gonna hit?
I've had a few of those experiences, and it's when I know that when I know that the punchline works, like then I can work backwards from that.
Right,
If I can work backwards from a punchline that I know hits, it's a twist of a phrase, it comes out of left field, it catches people off guard, it's a word play. If I know that that's going to hit, I'm like, oh, I've really got something here, and I work
right.
backwards from that so that the setup is nice and tight, which I learned from listening to a Seinfeld interview about the setup. And that's when I feel really confident. Now, obviously, nothing's a sure thing. I mean, there are times when I've gotten ready to get up
Yep.
on stage and I've been like, oh, yeah, this is going to kill. And then it did not. There's one
Right.
bit, I can't remember offhand what it is right now, but there's a bit that I feel great about. And I just can't get crowds to like, it
Uh,
gets laughs, but it doesn't. And so, sometimes you just realize this is just not as funny to strangers as it is to me. And since
yeah.
since it matters more what they think, then I probably need to move on or work on it until it's stronger. So there have been a few times, but a lot of times it's just trial and error.
Yeah.
And taking advice into consideration. I had a bit that I was doing for a long time, and it was
Yep.
getting laughs, but I was in the funniest person in Louisville competition in the summer of 23, 2 summers ago, and at the finals, I got second. At the finals, one of the judges came up to me and he said, "You know how you say this? What if you added these 3 words?" And I added those 3 words from then on, and so,
Nice.
a lot of times you're never completely finished with a
Yeah,
joke, because I thought that joke was as good as it was gonna as good as I was
yeah,
gonna make it.
yeah.
And yet he comes along with a quick little, tag that was epic, and it kills every time. I still do that joke, so.
What a gift for somebody to give you, right?
Oh,
I mean,
I know,
yeah.
so great.
It's amazing, and that to me is like one of those times where like the comedy scene is working at its best, right? When
Yeah,
comedians are looking out for each other and building each other up and not being, there's a lot of people out there who would think perhaps what that guy thought and withhold the three words because if you get more shine, that means they get less, right? There's this
yeah.
like famine mentality and they won't give it, and that just drives me crazy, that sort of thing. So what a gift when people are, building each other up like that. That's amazing.
Well, and I've been very fortunate. I'm not like others in this local scene. I'm 51 years old. I'm married with 2 older kids. I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
I'm not lame. I mean,
You're
there's no
clean.
territorialism. The
Yeah.
other comics who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, different life phase, they've all
Yeah.
been very kind. And I think a lot of it also is that a lot of my humor comes from personal stories.
Yeah.
And so it's not like I'm taking material or diving into material that they could use.
Right.
They're talking about stuff way different than I am anyway. And so I think I don't know, I'm different enough from the rest of the comics around here where they've been very supportive and they don't see me as intrusive, or stepping on their territory at all. It's been
Yeah.
really great.
That's great, man. That's excellent. Well, for those of you out there watching or listening, head over to Instagram and then Instagram.com at T Probus, Probus, and give Todd a follow. If you're watching, I'm going to show that on the screen here and you'll be able to see it. But T Probus on Instagram, give him a follow. And yeah, a great profile picture there.
Yeah.
And you can keep up with what Todd's doing there in Kentucky, the Cincinnati, Louisville, that area. So yeah, man, Todd, it's great to connect with you, dude.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. It's been
I
a lot of
wish we
fun.
had connected, years ago when I was back in,
Yeah.
Lexington area, but it's good to connect now. And thanks for coming on, man. We're gonna do a second episode as well. And in that episode, y'all, Todd's gonna bring something that I don't know he's been working on or thinking about, or that we can try to punch up together. And we'll work on a joke. So you'll be able to just kind of peek behind the curtain and see what goes on. And then we'll try to make up some jokes on the spot. So you're not going to want to miss part two of our discussion. Head over to Instagram at Todd Probus. And once you've done that, head over to at michaelhalcomb.live and give me a follow as well. Or head over to michaelhalcomb.live, the website. I got a daily comedy blog on there and post the podcasts like these and all kinds of other stuff, tips for comedy almost daily. So check that out as well. But Todd, good to meet you, dude. Thanks for
Yeah,
coming
same.
on.
It's been
Yeah,
fun.
and yeah, thanks to everybody else for watching and listening. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all the things because this is on there. We appreciate you. We're gonna stop there and say we hope that helps.